Hi, I'm Dan Lipkan, head librarian of the Phillips Library at the Peabody Essex Museum and co-curator of the Peabody Essex Museum exhibition, The Salem Witch Trials 1692. I have special permission to be here in the museum without my mask on, but we do require that all visitors wear masks that cover the mouth and nose. The Salem Witch Trials 1692 displays original documents and the personal possessions of those involved. We have organized the exhibition around the personal stories of those people involved in the trials. So join me on a tour of the exhibition and I'll show you some of the highlights. Witch hunting had gone on for hundreds of years before Salem, and we begin the exhibition in Europe where nearly 50,000 people were executed, mainly women, for witchcraft. The foundational manual for witch hunting was the book The Malleus Maleficarum, published originally in 1486 in Germany, and it was used in church courts and in secular courts to prosecute witches, or perceived witches. The Puritan settlers brought with them the idea that witchcraft and witches were real. The typical English settler here regarded the devil as real and witches as his accomplices in bringing misfortune and wreaking havoc. So we're here in Salem in early New England. We have an extremely rare 17th century interior door and a couple of leaded windows, bringing the visitor from the larger context of Europe to something that's more local, more human scale, and more personable. Through this section, we are getting closer and closer to Salem, Massachusetts, and the witchcraft trials. So now we enter the events of 1692-93 in Salem, and we begin with Tituba, who was essentially ground zero for this whole crisis. Very little is known about Tituba. She is an indigenous person of unknown origin. She was one of 3 women accused of witchcraft, and she accused several others. The testimony that she gave confirmed for the community that there was a witchcraft conspiracy. So one of the really interesting things about this particular section of the exhibition is that we have Joseph and Bathsheba Pope, one of the main accusers of the trials, flanked by people they accused, John and Elizabeth Proctor on one side and the Town family sisters on the other. The most emotional and powerful document, probably in the entire universe of the Salem witch trials, is the petition of Mary Easty from the middle of September 1692. We have pulled a very moving and important quote from this petition. It reads, "I petition to your honors not for my own life, for I know I must die and my appointed time is set, but, if it be possible, no more innocent blood may be shed." She knows she's going to die, but she is asking that the court consider the others that are also accused, which I think is a really heroic moment in this whole crisis. So we're here among objects and documents related to Philip and Mary English, probably the wealthiest folks in town. Social status and wealth didn't protect you from accusations of witchcraft. You may see this chair facing the wall and wonder why it's oriented the way it is. This belonged to the Englishes, and it was purchased and put on display by Reverend William Bentley, who lived in the Crown and Shield Bentley house down the street. He was one of the first collectors of trials-related relics, and he had the slats painted with 1692 on the top slat, M. English on the middle, and April 22nd on the bottom slat. And these indicated that this chair belonged to Mary English, and April 22nd was the date of her arrest. Across the way here on the other side of the panel about the Englishes is the warrant for Mary's arrest dated April 21st. So this is another instance where we can tie a document to an object to a person, which is something that really only PEM can do. Welcome to the Salem Jail, which would have been a pretty horrible place to be. There was a dirt floor, there wasn't any air circulation, the sanitary facilities were probably non-existent. We've attempted to evoke the claustrophobia of the jail by having a short drop ceiling here. You would have been chained to the wall, and then in order to gain your release from jail, you would have had to have paid all of your fees for food and lodging, as it were. So here we're looking at the story of Giles and Martha Corey, 2 people who were accused and ultimately executed. Martha was hung on September 22nd. Quite shocking to the community because she was a respected member of the church. Giles was kind of a bad man. A couple of his previous wives had died under mysterious circumstances, and he was accused of beating one of his farmhands to death. When he went on trial, he refused to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. The prescribed course of action was to torture a person under the weight of heavy stones until they chose to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. Giles ended up saying nothing except more weight, so more stones were placed on top of him, and ultimately he was crushed to death. The only pressing to death in Massachusetts history, and he was one of the 20 executions of the witchcraft trials. So here we are at a display that only the Peabody Essex Museum can put together. We're in front of the set of objects related to George Jacobs. We have two canes that were actually owned by Jacobs. Behind me is a painting of his trial on August 5th, in which you see on the floor in front of him one of those walking sticks. Behind me on my left is a transcription of his preliminary examination, in which his accusers claim that Jacobs' ghost beat them with these two very canes. In the exhibition, we also feature people involved in the judicial side of the Salem witchcraft trials, one of whom is Judge Samuel Sewall, one of 9 judges appointed by Governor William Phipps to serve on the Court of Oyer and Terminer to take part in the proceedings of the Salem witch trials. What's notable about Sewall is he was the only judge to publicly confess and express remorse for his role in what ultimately led to the deaths of 25 innocent people. So we close the events of 1692-93 with the death warrant of Bridget Bishop. Bishop was the first accused witch to have been put on trial by Attorney General Thomas Newton. She may have been an easy target for Newton because she had been accused of witchcraft about a dozen years earlier and acquitted. In this document, Chief Justice William Stoughton writes on June 8th that Bridget Bishop is condemned to death for crimes of witchcraft and that she is to be executed 2 days later. He's affixed his wax seal. And what's interesting about this particular piece of paper is the officer's return along the bottom, written by Sheriff George Corwin. It's the report that the sheriff made back to the Chief Justice. And I'll read a quote from Corwin's entry here. "I have taken the body of the within named Bridget Bishop to the place provided for her execution and caused the said Bridget to be hanged by the neck until she was dead." So here Corwin has reported that he has done the job requested of him, and Bridget Bishop was the first execution of the Salem witch trials. We've created a memorial wall listing all of the victims of the Salem witch trials, all 25 victims, 20 who were executed, 19 hung, 1 pressed to death, and 5 who died in prison. So few local people were willing to question the witchcraft trials initially because it could put them under suspicion. And so in this section, we are showing some publications that were issued in the immediate aftermath of the trials, both for and against. One book by Cotton Mather was written at the request of Governor William Phipps to defend the trials. Because everybody realized that the trials were a sham, it effectively ruined his reputation. This book by Thomas Mall, called Truth Held Forth and Maintained, the first book to be published under its own author's name, not anonymous, which was an act of extreme courage. Mall was eventually jailed and tried for sedition, for criticizing the government. Recent scholarship believes that his acquittal essentially set the stage for freedom of the press and freedom of speech. Behind me in the final section, Reckoning and Reflection, we highlight 6 sites that you can go to if you want to continue your journey of learning and reflection about the Salem witch trials. One of which is right behind the museum, the Salem Witch Trials Memorial from 1992. These events happen to real people, and these aren't just characters in a movie or a play. This happened a long time ago, and it does seem a little bit unreal, but these were people that had families and brothers and sisters and daughters, just like you and me. So the final wall of the exhibition includes this quote from the proposal for the Salem Witch Trials Memorial by artist Maggie Smith and architect James Cutler. "Deafness to the voices of others is the root of injustice. Silence in the presence of injustice is complicity. Persecution for invented crimes is a symptom of injustice. Memory of those taken by past injustice should remain with us to guide us in the future."